I did vote for Brexit, but with hindsight, if I could change my vote, I would change it now.
If the cost of living is a reflection of what Brexit was all about, well, it's been a disaster, quite frankly.
Most of us that voted for Brexit, we wouldn't have voted if we had known that we're going to be going through all this stuff.
These are the growing sentiments of regret among British voters. The very people who once championed the Brexit cause are now voicing their doubts and expressing remorse. With every passing day, the promises of a brighter future outside the EU are overshadowed by skyrocketing living costs, dwindling opportunities, and an economy grappling to survive. So, how did the dream of taking back control unravel into a harsh reality of economic challenges and broken promises? Why are so many Britons looking back at 2016 with regret? And most importantly, why did so many see it coming, except the UK itself? Let's unpack the journey from Brexit euphoria to Bregret. When the UK voted to leave the European Union, 52% of voters chose yes to Brexit, while 48% said no. Promises were made including control over borders, freedom from EU regulations, economic opportunities, and of course that infamous £350 million a week pledge to fund the NHS. These were the selling points that resonated with many. But 8 years later, a growing number of Brits feel like they were sold a dream that hasn't quite come true, and now regretting their decision to vote to leave the EU. In poll after poll, a majority of Brits, both Remainers and a significant chunk of Leavers, believe Brexit hasn't delivered. According to a Redfield and Wilton poll, 56% of Britons would now vote to rejoin the EU if another referendum were held. And that includes nearly a quarter of those who voted leave back in 2016. A YouGov poll adds more to the story. Most Britons now say Brexit was a mistake. In fact, 62% view Brexit as more of a failure than a success. Only a slim 12% think it could have been more successful, and 19% sit on the fence, labeling it neither. Even among Leave voters, the sentiment is far from unanimous. About 33% believe Brexit has been a failure, while 28% consider it a success, and 34% remain undecided. Now let's break it down a bit further. Among Conservative voters, the divide is razor thin. 32% think Brexit has been a success, 31% a failure, and 32% fall in the neither camp. But Reform UK voters? They tend to lean towards a more nuanced perspective. A significant 40% think Brexit hasn't been either a success or a failure, while the rest are split down the middle. But here's an interesting twist. Even those who believe Brexit has been a failure can't seem to agree on why. Among Tory voters who consider Brexit a failure, 49% say it was doomed from the start. No government could have made it work. On the flip side, 46% argue it had potential but was botched by successive governments. Reform UK voters, however, tell a different story. A staggering 76% of those who see Brexit as a failure blame the Conservatives for mishandling it, insisting it could have worked under better leadership. Only 15% believe it was always destined to flop. And when you zoom out to the broader Leave voting public, a similar trend emerges. 71% think Brexit had the potential for success, while just 19% believe it was always doomed. So, what does this all mean? For one, the tide of public opinion has shifted dramatically. In 2016, Britain voted 52% to 48% to leave the EU. If that referendum were held again today, the result would likely flip. The latest surveys show that 59% would now vote to rejoin the European Union, compared to just 41% who would not, if there were a new referendum now. This graph of a recent opinion poll clearly shows that the majority of Britons now believe Brexit has been bad for the UK economy, harmful to their own personal finances, and disruptive in areas it was supposed to improve, like controlling immigration and boosting trade. Among over 2,000 surveyed voters, only 1 in 10 feel Brexit has helped their financial situation, and a mere 9% think it has benefited the NHS. Compare that to 47% who see Brexit as a negative force for healthcare. The rising cost of living is one of the major factors that many Britons regret voting for Brexit. Brexit was touted as a way to boost the economy, yet 63% of those surveyed believe it's been a major factor in driving up prices, worsening the cost of living crisis. Only 7% think Brexit has helped curb inflation, a stark indictment of the promises made. And what about the broader economy? Just 22% of voters think Brexit has been good for the UK overall. Even among those who backed Leave, more than half are now disillusioned. They feel Brexit's implementation, not the idea itself, is to blame. 53% of Leave voters think the government has mishandled immigration, an issue central to the Brexit campaign. The promises of freer trade and economic growth haven't materialised. Instead, 49% believe Brexit has been bad for the UK business's ability to import goods, while only 15% think it has helped. Trade deals touted as transformative have failed to deliver significant gains. For instance, small farmers and businesses, once staunch supporters of Brexit, now feel betrayed by reduced subsidies and higher operational costs. This rising discontent has given birth to Bregret, a term describing the regret many Britons feel about voting to leave the EU. Recent studies show 55% of Britons now think the country made the wrong decision in 2016. Among Leave voters, 18% have changed their minds, tipping public opinion significantly. While regret is widespread, many Leave voters still believe in the potential benefits of Brexit, if only they were properly realised. Among 70% of Leave voters think the idea was sound but poorly executed by successive Conservative governments. Let's talk about the political chaos that followed the referendum. Since 2016, Britain has seen 5 prime ministers in 8 years, each grappling with Brexit's fallout. The Conservative Party, once united by the mantra, "Get Brexit done," now finds itself associated with economic turmoil, rising bills, and struggling public services. Even staunch Brexiteers admit to disappointment. In Richmond, North Yorkshire, a Leave stronghold, local farmers and small business owners now openly criticise the government's handling of Brexit. They cite trade barriers, labour shortages, and unfulfilled promises as sources of frustration. Brexit's impact is also reshaping British politics. Disillusioned Leave voters are shifting away from the Conservatives, some gravitating towards the Reform Party. Meanwhile, former Remainers feel vindicated by Brexit's economic fallout and are rallying behind Labour. However, even among Remainers, there's little appetite to reopen the Brexit debate. While Brexit remains a topic of discontent, it's not the burning issue it once was. For most voters, pressing concerns like the cost of living, NHS backlogs, and economic growth have taken precedence. It's now clear the decision to leave the EU has left Britain divided and economically strained. 8 years on, Bregret is real, and it's reshaping the conversation around the UK's relationship with Europe. The debate now isn't just about the past, it's about the future. Some, like the Green Party, are already calling for the UK to rejoin the EU. Others, like the Liberal Democrats, are advocating for more gradual steps, perhaps rejoining the single market as a first move. But for most Brits, the question isn't just, was Brexit a mistake? It's what happens next. 8 years after Brexit, it's safe to say Britain's relationship with the European Union remains a hot-button issue. While it didn't dominate the 2024 general election as it did in 2019, the lingering effects of Brexit and growing regret are reshaping the conversation. So, is rejoining the EU a distant dream, or could it become a reality? Public sentiment has shifted significantly since Brexit became a reality. According to YouGov, 53% of Britons now support rejoining the EU, while 36% are opposed. Even more intriguing, a solid 63% favour bringing Britain closer to the EU's orbit without rejoining its major institutions, like the single market or customs union. This includes overwhelming support from 70% of Labour voters, 70% of Remain voters, and even 61% of Leave voters. Yet despite these numbers, Prime Minister Keir Starmer has made it clear the UK will not rejoin either the EU, the single market, or the customs union within his lifetime. His focus is on improving trade relations rather than reopening the Brexit wound. Starmer's reasoning? The political and social divisions a second referendum would bring could destabilise the country even further. One of the biggest hurdles to rejoining the EU is the lack of a clear political mandate. Only 21% of Britons believe Starmer's election victory in 2024 gives Labour the green light to reverse Brexit. Even among Labour voters, just 27% feel Starmer has the authority to rejoin the EU. This limited mandate leaves Labour with 2 primary options. The first is maintaining the status quo, a position backed by 40% of the public. However, Only 29% actively want this, while 50% are opposed. The second, more popular option is to foster a closer relationship with the EU without rejoining its institutions, a strategy supported by 45% of Britons. Starmer seems aligned with this pragmatic approach. His manifesto pledged to secure a better deal with the EU, particularly in trade, without revisiting the deeply divisive issue of membership. Worsening economic situation is another important aspect in the rejoining debate. Economic fallout from Brexit has amplified public dissatisfaction. A study by Aston University revealed that Britain's annual exports to the EU are 17% lower, and imports are down 23% compared to a non-Brexit scenario. Unsurprisingly, many Britons are questioning whether the economic hit was worth it. The Liberal Democrats, who won a record 72 seats in the 2024 election, have capitalized on this sentiment. Their focus? Rejoining the single market and introducing programs like a youth mobility visa scheme with the EU. Yet, even they are treading cautiously, aware that a full-on rejoin campaign could reignite divisive debates over issues like border control and currency. Before the 2024 election, 71% of Britons believed the government was handling Brexit poorly. Post-election, that number has dropped to 51%, but it's still a majority. The least popular option moving forward? Further loosening ties with the EU. Only 22% support this direction, while 59% are firmly opposed. This sends a clear message. Britons want to repair relations, not sever them further. So, could Britain rejoin the EU? Politically, it seems unlikely in the short term. Labour's cautious stance and the divisive nature of the issue make a second referendum a daunting prospect. Even the pro-EU Liberal Democrats are hesitant to push for full membership, focusing on smaller, incremental changes. But public opinion tells a more nuanced story. The appetite for rejoining, or at least rekindling ties, exists, with 63% backing closer relations and 53% supporting rejoining outright. The seeds of shift are there. Whether these numbers translate into political action remains to be seen. For now, rejoining the EU amid Bregret feels like a distant dream. But with public sentiment evolving and economic realities weighing heavy, the door isn't entirely closed. It's no secret that the fallout from Brexit has left many in the UK frustrated, whether they voted leave or remain back in 2016. Trust in political parties is shaky at best, with many voters feeling abandoned on issues that hit much closer to home, like the cost of living crisis and the state of the NHS. So where does Brexit fit into all of this? And more importantly, how can the UK and the EU move forward? While dissatisfaction with Brexit is widespread, it doesn't necessarily translate into a unified push to rejoin the EU, as many polls indicate that a growing number of Leave voters are open to the idea of a friendlier and more cooperative relationship with the EU. This isn't about reversing Brexit, but about building a foundation for better collaboration. The UK-EU Trade and Cooperation Agreement signed in December 2020 was a huge step in redefining this new relationship, covering areas like judicial cooperation, intellectual property, and social security coordination. It's one of the most ambitious agreements the EU has ever signed with a third country. Fast forward to February 2023, and we saw another significant development, the Windsor Framework. This agreement, crafted by the then Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, tackled the complex challenges faced by citizens and businesses in Northern Ireland. These milestones show that progress is possible when both sides are willing to work together. In September 2023, another breakthrough was achieved when the UK and the EU reached a political agreement on the UK's participation in Horizon Europe and Copernicus. These programs focus on research, innovation, and space exploration, areas where collaboration benefits both sides. Additionally, an agreement with the North Seas Energy Corporation in late 2022 aimed to enhance joint action on offshore renewable energy, a critical step in addressing global energy challenges. However, it's not all smooth sailing. Brexit has brought its share of economic headaches. The cost of imports has risen, driving up household bills, and businesses face increased red tape when trading with EU neighbours. Despite these challenges, there is a silver lining. The political landscape is stabilising, and day-to-day cooperation between British and European officials is improving. What's even more interesting is how public opinion has shifted. More Britons now favour rejoining the EU. While that might not lead to immediate action, It underscores a broader desire for closer ties. And let's not forget the economic realities. Closer trade relationships with the EU could ease some of the financial pressures facing the UK. So, what's next? Experts have proposed a special partnership between the UK and the EU. This wouldn't mean rewriting the Brexit story, but rather crafting a narrative of mutual benefit and respect. The idea is to deepen economic and political cooperation in areas of shared interest while allowing room for differences where necessary. Some key recommendations for this partnership include aligning UK regulations with EU standards in areas like food safety and product rules. This could simplify trade by enabling mutual recognition of conformity assessments. Another proposal involves enhanced mobility agreements for business professionals and youth, creating opportunities on both sides. On the environmental front, linking the UK and EU emissions trading systems could lower energy trading costs and avoid carbon border taxes. Security is another area ripe for collaboration, with plans to deepen law enforcement and criminal justice ties. A new leaders-level EU-UK summit could ensure that these discussions remain a priority. The ultimate goal here isn't just to fix what's broken, but to create a system that works for both sides. The UK and the EU can forge a more functional and constructive relationship, leaving the door open for future generations to decide their path.